The studio lights rose the way they always had, warm and reassuring, bathing the familiar set in a glow that millions of viewers recognized instantly. The audience applauded on cue, the music faded smoothly, and the cameras moved with practiced ease. On the surface, it was just another morning, another show following a rhythm perfected over years. Yet something in the room felt different, subtle enough to escape definition but strong enough to be felt. The air carried a softness, a pause that lingered longer than usual, as though the moment itself was asking for patience. Before anyone spoke, there was a shared sense that this morning would not unfold like the others. It wasn't tension or drama. It was presence, a quiet awareness that honesty was about to take the place of routine. The smile that held more than habit. Kelly walked onto the set wearing the smile audiences had come to know well, warm and welcoming, the kind that had opened countless mornings with ease. But beneath it was something deeper, something shaped by thought rather than habit. Her eyes carried a gentleness that hinted at reflection, and she blinked slowly, as if grounding herself before stepping fully into the moment. Mark joined her with his familiar calm, his greeting steady but softer than usual, matching her energy without needing explanation. When they sat behind the desk, there was no immediate banter, no easy transition into conversation. Instead, a pause settled between them, unspoken but understood. It was the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled, only respected. When silence is honest. The quiet stretched gently across the studio, not uncomfortable, but meaningful. Kelly rested her hands together, fingers loosely intertwined, anchoring herself as she took a slow breath. The microphone picked up the subtle sound, a reminder that this moment wasn't rehearsed. She looked up with calm intention and spoke softly. "Good morning," she said, allowing the words to land before continuing. "Today feels a little different." It was a simple acknowledgement, yet it shifted the tone of the entire room. She wasn't announcing news or delivering a statement. She was inviting people into a moment of sincerity. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was space, and everyone listening felt it, speaking beyond the cameras. As Kelly continued, her gaze moved past the lenses and lights, as if she were speaking directly to the people who had welcomed her into their homes for years. She reflected on time, on how quietly it moves, reshaping life while we're busy living it. She spoke about gratitude, about growing up in public view, and about learning who she was beneath the roles she played. Her words weren't dramatic or carefully framed. They were simple observations, shared without polish. That simplicity gave them weight. This wasn't about explaining anything or preparing anyone for change. It was about acknowledging growth as something natural and ongoing, even when life feels steady on the outside. Choosing to step outside the script. There was no teleprompter guiding her phrasing, no prepared lines waiting to be delivered. What viewers were hearing was thought spoken aloud, honest and unguarded. Kelly spoke about routine, about the comfort it brings and the way it can quietly shape a life. She acknowledged the pressure to always show up the same way, to perform consistency even when internal landscapes shift. She described how easy it is to lose sight of yourself when your days follow a familiar pattern. The room didn't feel like a studio anymore. It felt like a shared conversation, one built on trust rather than expectation. A presence that didn't interrupt. Throughout it all, Mark remained quietly attentive. He didn't rush the moment or redirect it. His role wasn't to fill the space, but to protect it. When Kelly paused, he waited. When her voice softened, he leaned in slightly, offering reassurance without words. At one point, his hand rested near hers on the desk, a small, grounding gesture that spoke volumes. It wasn't performative. It was instinctive. Viewers noticed immediately, not because it was highlighted, but because it felt genuine. The support between them didn't need explanation. It was felt. Reflections on change without fear. Kelly spoke about change not as something sudden or disruptive, but as something gradual and human. She explained that loving something deeply doesn't mean it must stay the same forever. Growth, she said, can coexist with gratitude. Her reflections weren't about endings or departures. They were about awareness, about recognizing when a chapter begins to feel different and allowing yourself to acknowledge that without guilt. The tone wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, even hopeful. The audience wasn't being asked to prepare for loss, but to consider evolution as a natural part of life. The comfort and cost of routine. She described mornings that start before sunrise, the comfort of familiarity, and the quiet cost of repetition. There was no resentment in her voice, only honesty. She spoke of wanting to experience time more fully, to slow down without watching the clock, to savor moments without measuring them. These weren't grand desires. They were simple, deeply relatable wishes. In sharing them, she gave voice to something many people feel but rarely articulate. The idea that it's okay to pause, to reassess, and to listen to yourself without apology settled gently into the room. A connection that felt universal. What resonated most wasn't her role or her platform. It was the humanity behind her words. Anyone who had ever stayed in a rhythm longer than it fit, anyone who had wrestled with change while holding on to gratitude, recognized themselves in her reflections. Kelly wasn't distancing herself from her audience. She was standing alongside them. The moment became less about her and more about shared experience, about the quiet courage it takes to acknowledge personal growth. Honoring the journey without rewriting it. Images appeared behind her, moments from years gone by, filled with laughter, conversation, and connection. Kelly watched with a soft smile, eyes glistening but steady. "I don't regret any of it," she said, and the sincerity in her voice made the words settle deeply. This wasn't nostalgia for something lost. It was appreciation for something lived fully. The past wasn't being closed. It was being honored, carried forward with respect. Courage over comfort. When Mark finally spoke, his words didn't interrupt the tone. They complemented it. He spoke about courage not as something loud or dramatic, but as something quiet and personal. Choosing honesty, he said, often requires more bravery than staying comfortable. Kelly smiled, a small laugh escaping as she acknowledged the fear that comes with reflection. Fear, she noted, doesn't mean something is wrong. Sometimes it simply means you're paying attention. A moment that lingered. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was steady, thoughtful, and sincere. People stood not because they were prompted, but because they felt included in something real. Kelly placed a hand over her heart, gratitude written plainly on her face. There was no final statement, no dramatic close. Just acknowledgement. When the cameras eventually pulled back, what remained wasn't speculation or drama. It was recognition. A reminder that life is allowed to evolve gently, that honesty connects us, and that even the quietest moments can carry the deepest meaning.